Hi guys, tonight we're stepping into the hot, smoky beginning of steel, when the modern world is still asleep inside red stones, black charcoal, and the hands of people who have no idea they're helping build railways, skyscrapers, scalpels, engines, bridges, and tiny teaspoons that somehow vanish in every kitchen. What does it feel like to stand near the first furnaces, listening to fire breathe like an animal in the dark? How does plain earth become a material so stubborn that whole civilizations lean on it? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while the embers begin to glow, tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is. Maybe it is midnight in Manila, evening in Toronto, or some suspiciously quiet hour when even your refrigerator seems to be thinking, now. Dim the lights. You walk toward a fire older than cities of glass, older than train stations, older than the smooth steel elevator doors that open and close without drama. The ground beneath your feet is uneven and cool. Dry grass brushes your ankles. Somewhere nearby, wood smoke curls into the night air, sharp and earthy, carrying the smell of burnt branches, damp soil, and hot stone. You hear a low crackle from a clay furnace, not very large, not impressive by modern standards, but deeply alive. It breathes when air is pushed through it. It flares when charcoal settles. It mutters in little pops and sighs, like an old creature annoyed at being woken up. You're not standing in one single place, because the earliest story of iron does not belong to one village or one hero. It rises in several places across the ancient world, slowly, unevenly, with plenty of trial, error, and probably some very tired apprentices. People already know metals before iron becomes common. Copper can be worked. Bronze, made from copper and tin, has shaped tools, ornaments, weapons, and status. Bronze is beautiful, reliable, and easier to melt than iron. It has the glow of prestige. Iron, by comparison, is troublesome. It demands higher heat. It hides inside ore, mixed with oxygen and other minerals, like a secret that refuses to come out politely. Still, you can imagine someone noticing reddish stones near a fire. Perhaps a lump changes colour. Perhaps a black crust forms. Perhaps a small metallic bloom appears, ugly and promising. The first ironworkers do not melt iron into flowing liquid the way later furnaces will. Their fires usually cannot reach that heat. Instead, they use a bloomery, a furnace where iron ore and charcoal are heated together until a spongy lump of iron forms. This lump, called a bloom, is full of slag, little glassy impurities that must be hammered out while the metal is hot. A mainstream historical fact rests quietly here before cast iron and modern steelmaking. Bloomery furnaces produced wrought iron by reducing ore with charcoal, and the result had to be worked by repeated heating and hammering. You stand close enough to feel the furnace heat on your cheeks. It is not comfortable, exactly. It is a dry, pushing heat, the kind that makes your eyelashes feel suddenly important. A worker crouches near the opening and watches the colour inside. There are no digital gauges, no clean laboratory panels, no tidy switch-labelled "Make Civilization." There is only experience. The worker studies glow, smoke, sound, and timing. Too little air, and the furnace sulks. Too much, and the fire may race away from control. The bellows wheeze, perhaps made from animal hide and wood, forcing air into the charcoal bed. The rhythm is steady press, release, press, release. It sounds almost like sleep breathing. If sleep were hot enough to change the fate of agriculture, warfare, architecture, and office chairs. The ore begins as stone. It may be hematite, magnetite, or another iron-rich mineral, though the ancient worker does not need modern names to understand usefulness. Names come later, because humans adore naming things once they have already survived them. Charcoal does two wonderful things. It provides heat, and it releases carbon monoxide. which helps pull oxygen away from the iron oxide in the ore. The chemistry is elegant, but from where you stand, it feels more like negotiation with invisible spirits. Rock goes in, fire argues with it, metal comes out, not pure, not perfect, but workable. And what a strange material it is. Wrought iron is fibrous, tough, and more forgiving than brittle cast iron. It bends before breaking. It can be forged into nails, knives, plough parts, hinges, axes, and bars. Yet it is not quite steel. Not usually. Steel is iron with enough carbon to become harder and stronger, but not so much that it turns brittle like cast iron. Early steel often appears by accident, when carbon from charcoal enters the surface of hot iron. The boundary between iron and steel is not a bright line in ancient workshops. It is more like a misty path. Some tools end up harder, some edges hold better, some pieces crack. Because the metal has opinions and rarely shares them in advance. You notice the hammering next. A bloom is pulled from the furnace, glowing orange and dripping bits of slag. It looks like something born from a volcano and a bad idea. The smith and helpers strike it again and again. The sound rings across the dark, heavy, wet thuds at first, then sharper notes as the mass tightens. Slag squeezes out like dark honey. Sparks jump and vanish. The smell is hot mineral, ash, sweat, and singed leather. Every blow makes the bloom denser. Every reheating gives another chance to shape it. The work is slow, repetitive, and deeply skilled. You feel it in your wrists just by watching. There is a quirky little tidbit tucked into this ancient world. Some early iron may have come from meteorites, those rare gifts that fall from the sky already metallic. Long before large-scale iron smelting became common, people in places such as ancient Egypt valued meteoric iron enough to make beads and ceremonial objects from it. Imagine that. Before iron is dragged from stubborn ore, a few people are holding pieces of the heavens, polishing sky metal into ornaments. It is almost too poetic, which is usually when history clears its throat and reminds you that the polishing probably took ages and someone's fingers hurt. But most iron comes not from stars, but from earth and labour. Its spread changes daily life gradually. Iron tools can be made from more widely available ores than the ingredients for bronze, especially tin, which is not always easy to find. This matters. A village with access to iron ore and trees for charcoal has possibilities. Forests become fuel, mines become noisy, smiths become essential. Fields can be cut and turned with stronger implements. Wood can be shaped with better axes. Nails can hold structures together. Iron does not instantly replace bronze everywhere, because history is not a neat wardrobe change. It enters unevenly, sometimes slowly, sometimes dramatically, depending on trade, resources, skill, warfare, and the stubborn comfort of old habits. Historians still argue whether the rise of iron was mainly driven by technological superiority, by disruptions in bronze trade, or by local choices that varied from region to region. It is a useful uncertainty, the kind that keeps the past human. People do not wake up one morning and announce, "Today we begin the Iron Age. Please update your calendars." They adapt because supplies shift, neighbours compete, tools break, forests stand nearby, and somebody discovers that a well-forged iron blade can be extremely persuasive. You walk past a settlement at dawn. The furnace has cooled a little, though pale smoke still lifts from its mouth. Chickens scratch near ash piles. A child carries kindling. A pot hangs over a smaller cooking fire, releasing the smell of grain porridge. The air is cold enough that the warmth from the forge clings to your skin as you move away. In a nearby shed, finished iron pieces wait on a wooden bench. They are humble things: a knife, a hook, a chisel, a nail, a small blade with a darker edge where carbon may have entered. No one here sees a skyscraper in that nail. No one sees an ocean liner, a railway bridge, a surgical instrument, or a quiet spoon reflecting moonlight in a sink. They see repairs, harvest, trade, survival. That is enough. The earliest ironworkers live close to limits. Their furnaces are small, their fuel is local, their ore quality varies, the temperature changes with wind, moisture, and craft. Each batch is slightly different, which must have been annoying in exactly the way handmade things often are. You can almost hear a smith muttering at a cracked edge, blaming the ore, the apprentice, the weather, the gods, and possibly lunch. Yet within those imperfect batches lies a future material. Steel is not yet the obedient industrial product it will become. It is more like a rare mood of iron, sometimes coaxed, sometimes accidental, sometimes treasured. The beauty of this beginning is that it is not shiny. It is not the polished steel of a modern kitchen or the cold precision of a bridge cable. It is rough, smoky, and communal. It depends on charcoal burners who understand wood. It depends on miners who recognize useful stone. It depends on potters who can shape clay furnace walls. It depends on people strong enough to hammer hot blooms and patient enough to learn from failure. The material that will one day build the modern world begins in a place where everyone smells faintly of smoke and nobody has clean fingernails. You pause beside the cooling furnace and listen. The bellows are still. The hammers have stopped. Only little clicks come from the metal as it loses heat. Above you, the sky grows blue at the edges. The world feels ordinary again, but not quite. Somewhere inside the rough bar on the bench is a possibility: add a little carbon, remove some impurity, control the heat, repeat the process, and iron becomes something sharper, harder, more ambitious. It is not ready yet. It is learning. For now, you let the village wake around you. You feel the packed earth under your feet, the soft scratch of smoke in your throat, the fading warmth on your face. The first chapter of steel is not steel in full glory. It is a long patience with fire. It is ore carried in baskets, charcoal stacked by tired hands, bellows pressed in the dark, and sparks rising briefly before disappearing into morning air. The modern world is still hidden, still sleeping inside the furnace, while ancient workers listen to the fire and make, with no applause at all, the first stubborn pieces of a future made of metal. You sit near the workbench where the metal has been laid out in bars, strips, and half-finished tools, and the air around you feels quieter than the furnace yard. The night has settled into a deep blue stillness. A small lamp burns with a wavering yellow flame, and its light moves gently over iron surfaces, showing patches of dark scale, rubbed edges, tiny dents, and places where the hammer has left its memory. You hear the soft clink of tongs being moved aside. You smell charcoal dust, old ash, heated clay, and the faint sourness of sweat drying in wool. It is not elegant, this workshop. It is not the kind of place where a museum label would feel at home. It is low-roofed, practical, and very much aware that rain leaks through one corner. Here, the secret is not just iron, it's carbon. Carbon is almost embarrassingly common. It hides in charcoal, in living things, in soot, in breath, in the black smudge that gets on your fingers when you touch the wrong surface and then, naturally, touch your face. Yet when a small amount of carbon enters iron, the metal changes. It can become harder. It can hold an edge. It can resist bending in a different way. Too little carbon, and the iron stays soft and obedient. Too much, and it becomes brittle, ready to snap like a dry biscuit with delusions of grandeur. The magic lives in the balance. And ancient smiths learned that balance not through charts, but through colour, sound, failure, and touch. You watch a smith heat a narrow strip of iron in a charcoal fire. The metal begins dull red, then cherry red, then orange. The forge gives a steady hiss as air moves through the coals, Sparks lift and vanish like tiny insects made of light. The smith does not speak much. Talking is for people whose eyebrows are not currently negotiating with open flame. With tongs, the smith turns the piece, buries it again, draws it out, studies it, and returns it to the heat. The surface absorbs a little carbon from the surrounding charcoal. Not much, just enough, perhaps, to change the skin of the metal. This process, now often called carburizing or case hardening, was one way early workers gave iron a harder outer layer while leaving the inside tougher and more flexible. A mainstream historical fact is resting in the rhythm of those tongs. Steel is an alloy of iron and carbon, generally with more carbon than wrought iron and less than cast iron, and that difference in carbon content greatly affects hardness, ductility, and strength. Modern definitions may use percentages, but the ancient world did not need decimals to notice results. A knife that stayed sharp longer was a good knife. A chisel that did not deform immediately was worth keeping. A sword that broke at the worst possible moment was, scientifically speaking, a disaster with a handle. You feel the bench beneath your hand. The wood is rough, slightly warm near the tools, or gritty with filings and ash. A finished blade lies wrapped in cloth, and when it is lifted, you see the edge catch the lamplight in a thin silver line. It is not mirror bright. It is more serious than beautiful. The smith tests it against a scrap of hide, and then against a sliver of wood. The edge bites cleanly. The sound is small but satisfying, a crisp whisper in a world of rope, reeds, leather, bone, wood, and muscle. A reliable edge is not a luxury. It is food prepared, fields managed, animals tended, timber shaped, cloth cut, and enemies discouraged from getting creative. But the path to good steel is maddening. Iron can be heated, hammered, folded, reheated, quenched, and tempered, and each action changes its character. Quenching, the sudden cooling of hot steel in water or another liquid, can make it very hard. It can also make it fragile. Tempering, reheating it more gently afterward, can reduce brittleness. The smith may not explain it with crystal structures, but the hands know, the eye knows, the ear knows. The hiss when hot metal enters water tells its own story. You hear it now, a fierce shh that fills the workshop with steam. The air smells metallic and wet, like rain falling on a stone road that has been heated all day by the sun. The steam touches your face. It is warm, damp, and gone almost at once. The blade, once orange, is now dark. To you. It seems impossible that a single plunge could matter so much. To the smith, it is both ordinary and risky. Different waters may behave differently. Brine may cool faster. Oil, where used, may be gentler. Some traditions add herbs, bones, urine, or other ingredients to quenching liquids. Here comes the quirky little tidbit. Quietly padding in like a cat with dusty paws, many old metalworking traditions claim that bizarre quench recipes could give blades special power, including mixtures involving animal parts, plants, or bodily fluids. Some of these recipes may have had practical effects because salts, fats, or carbon-rich matter can influence cooling or surface chemistry, while others probably worked best as workshop theatre. And honestly, if you are selling a blade, quenched in mysterious moonlit goat business does sound more memorable than cooled at a reasonable rate. You move through different ancient and early historic worlds, not by walking on a road, but by following the idea of controlled carbon. In one region, a smith packs iron pieces and charcoal inside a sealed container and heats them for hours, letting carbon soak inward. In another, workers repeatedly heat and weld strips of iron and steel together, making tools with hard edges and softer backs. Somewhere else, a village learns that certain ores, certain fuels, and certain furnace habits produce metal that behaves better than expected. Knowledge travels through trade, marriage, migration, slavery, war, apprenticeship, and gossip, which remains one of humanity's underrated technologies. The workshop is full of almost invisible decisions. How hot is the fire? How long should the iron remain buried? Is the colour right? Does the hammer bounce properly? Does the file skate across the surface or bite into it? When the smith taps the steel, the tone is brighter than soft iron. You hear that difference, faint but real, a little ring inside the metal. The smith listens too, not romantically, perhaps. More like a person listening to a roof beam creak and deciding whether everyone should leave the house. There is no single clean invention moment for steel. It emerges from many experiments. It appears as treasured edges, specialized tools, and prized weapons. It is rare because it requires control. The right carbon level has to be achieved, and then the metal must be worked without ruining it. Heat can help, heat can also betray. Leave steel too hot for too long, and carbon may burn away from the surface. Cool it poorly, and stresses may form. Hammer it at the wrong temperature, and cracks begin. The material is not simply stronger iron. It is a relationship, and like many relationships, it becomes complicated when things get heated. Scholars continue to debate how much early smiths understood about carbon as a substance, rather than simply recognizing patterns in fuel, heat, and metal behavior. That uncertainty matters. It reminds you that practical knowledge can be powerful without being written in scientific language. A craftsperson may not know why a method works in modern terms, but still know when to stop, when to strike, and when to mutter darkly at an apprentice for letting the fire fade. You stand beside a hearth where thin bars are being welded. The smith scatters fine sand or flux onto hot metal to help the surfaces join. The smell shifts toward glassy heat and mineral dust. Hammer blows come in pairs, then in a quick roll. Bright scale flakes away. The joined bar lengthens, folds, and lengthens again. In some traditions, this repeated folding helps even out the metal, distribute carbon more consistently, and squeeze out impurities. It can also create visible patterns, especially when different irons and steels are combined. Later admirers will look at such patterns and speak of mystery. The smith may simply be thinking, "At last, this piece is behaving." History often gives poetry to someone else's exhausting Tuesday. You notice how valuable good steel becomes. It is not just a material, it is trust. A farmer trusts an edge at harvest. A carpenter trusts a chisel near a joint. A surgeon in later centuries will trust a blade near skin. A soldier trusts steel because fear has a way of clarifying opinions about metallurgy. Rulers value it. Traders carry it. Families pass down tools. A well-made steel object contains not only ore and carbon, but time. Time in the forest making charcoal, time in the mine sorting rock, time at the furnace, time under the hammer, time spent learning which colour means ready, and which colour means politely. You have made a mistake. The lamp burns lower. You can hear night insects outside the workshop, their thin voices trembling in the dark. The fire has settled into a bed of red coals under grey ash. When the smith lifts a finished tool and sets it beside the others, it makes a small, clean sound. Metal touching metal. Nothing grand happens. No trumpet announces that carbon has quietly changed civilization. Yet the change is there in the hard edge, in the resilient spine, in the careful cooling, in the knowledge passed from hand to hand. You let your fingers hover near the steel, not touching the sharpness, only feeling the last warmth rising from it. This is the hidden heart of the material, not iron alone, and not carbon alone, but their difficult partnership. A little darkness from charcoal enters bright metal, and the result becomes stronger than either ingredient suggests. The world outside is still mostly wood, clay, fibre, stone, and bone. But in workshops like this, beneath smoke-dark rafters, people are learning how to persuade iron to remember the fire differently. They do not yet command steel completely. They listen to it, they test it, they learn its moods, and in the quiet glow of the forge, the secret of carbon keeps slipping deeper into the metal, one careful heating at a time. You wake into heat, not the furnace heat of a cramped workshop, but the broad, golden heat of South Asia, where the air seems to carry sunlight even in the shade. You walk along a dusty track at the edge of a market town. Palm leaves stir above you with a dry whisper. Oxen shift their weight beside wooden carts. Somewhere a seller calls out in a sing-song voice, and somewhere else a hammer strikes metal with a clean, patient ring. The smell is layered in a live hot earth, sesame oil, spices, charcoal smoke, river mud, and the faint metallic tang of workshops tucked behind courtyards. Here, steel is becoming something more than a useful accident. It is becoming a craft of astonishing control. You are close to the world of woots. The famous crucible steel associated especially with South India and Sri Lanka traded widely across the Indian Ocean and into the Middle East. In simple terms, woots is made by placing iron, carbon-rich materials, and sometimes other ingredients into sealed crucibles, then heating them until the contents absorb carbon and form a small cake or ingot of high-carbon steel. Unlike a bloom hammered free of slag, this steel is born inside a closed clay vessel, hidden from direct view, as if the metal needs privacy to become impressive. You step into a workshop where rows of small crucibles sit near a furnace. They look humble, almost disappointing, little clay pots, darkened by heat, stacked and handled with practiced care. It would be very easy to walk past them and miss the drama entirely. History does this often. It hides the important things in objects that look like kitchen mistakes. A worker seals a crucible with clay, checking the rim with steady fingers. Inside may be pieces of wrought iron, fragments of old steel, wood, leaves, or other carbon-bearing matter. Some recipes are practical, some are traditional, some may be both, because craftspeople are rarely polite enough to divide knowledge into neat modern categories. When the furnace is lit, the sound grows slowly, first a crackle, then a deeper rush, then a pulsing roar as air feeds the fire. Heat presses against your skin and settles into your clothing. The clay floor is gritty underfoot. Smoke lifts through gaps in the roof and carries a smell like burnt wood, baked earth, and something green turned suddenly bitter. The workers do not open the crucibles to peek. That would ruin the process, and also make them look like amateurs, which in any century is a serious social risk. They judge by time, fuel, flame, and experience. A mainstream historical fact sits at the centre of this scene. Wootz steel was a high-carbon crucible, steel produced in parts of South Asia and exported for centuries, becoming one of the sources associated with the legendary Damascus blades admired across West Asia and Europe. The name Damascus steel can be confusing, because some blades were made or traded through Damascus, while the ingot steel itself often came from far away. Trade, as usual, enjoys making labels messy. A blade may carry the name of a city, the labour of one region, the ore of another, and the pride of a swordsmith who would prefer you stop asking too many questions. You watch as cooled crucibles are broken open. The clay cracks with a dry, satisfying sound. Inside lies a dark, rounded ingot, small enough to hold, dense with possibility. It is not a finished blade, it is a promise. Its surface may be rough, blackened, and plain, but within it are structures that, with skilled forging, can produce those flowing patterns later described as watered steel. The patterns can look like ripples, silk, smoke, or running water frozen inside metal. People admired them not only because they were beautiful, but because they suggested strength, mystery, and expensive taste. Humanity has always enjoyed a practical object that also quietly says, yes, this cost more. You follow the ingots outward, away from the furnace yard and into trade. They are packed, counted, bargained over, and carried along routes that connect inland production zones with ports and distant cities. You hear the creak of cartwheels, the slap of sandals, the clatter of scales, the mutter of merchants calculating profit. The ingots move through a world of languages, scripts, coins, and customs duties. They cross water in ships that smell of rope, tar, fish, and stored grain. Salt air touches your face, sails snap in the wind. At night, cargo rests in darkness beneath wooden decks, and little cakes of steel travel beside pepper. Textiles, ivory, ceramics, and stories that grow slightly taller with each telling. There is a quirky tidbit, almost too good not to smile at. Some later accounts claim that the finest blades could cut a falling silk scarf, slice gun barrels, or bend in impossible arcs and spring back perfectly. Many of these tales are exaggerated, polished by admiration and market gossip, but they show how deeply people were impressed by this steel. The blade did not merely cut, it performed, it became a celebrity, and like most celebrities, it attracted rumours. In a smithy far from the place where the ingot was made, you see the next transformation. The crucible cake is heated carefully, too hot, and the internal structure may be ruined, too cold, and the steel may crack under the hammer. The smith's task is delicate. The metal is high in carbon, harder and less forgiving than low-carbon iron. It cannot simply be bullied into shape, it must be persuaded. The hammer falls with measured rhythm, not frantic force. Ting, pause, ting. The blade lengthens slowly. The smith watches colour with almost sleepy attention, but nothing here is careless. The atmosphere feels focused, intimate, and tense, as if everyone in the room knows the steel can remember mistakes. The pattern develops through forging, heat treatment, and polishing. It is not painted on. It is not merely decorative. It emerges from the internal arrangement of carbon-rich structures within the steel. Modern researchers have studied surviving blades and ingots, finding that trace elements, thermal cycling, and forging methods may all affect the famous watered appearance. Historians still argue whether the most admired Damascus patterns depended mainly on South Asian chemistry. Crucible recipes, Middle Eastern forging techniques, or a fragile combination of all three. That uncertainty gives the material a special hush. The secret was not one trick. It may have been an entire chain of skilled choices, any one of which could be lost. You walk through a bazaar where finished blades hang in dim stalls. Their polished surfaces catch lamplight in faint waves. A merchant draws one slightly from its scabbard, just enough to show the pattern. He tilts it, and the lines move like dark water under ice. The handle may be horn, wood, ivory, or metal, shaped for the hand of someone wealthy enough to enjoy both danger and decoration. You feel the coolness of the blade's spine when it is offered for inspection. It is smooth, but not soft. It has a quiet confidence. Nearby, other shoppers pretend not to stare. They are staring, obviously. People have always stared at expensive things while acting spiritually above them. Yet Woods is not only about weapons. Crucible steel also belongs to tools, status, science, and trade. High-quality steel can serve artisans who need sharp edges and durable points. It influences the reputations of regions and workshops. It pulls together miners, charcoal makers, potters, furnace tenders, merchants, sailors, moneylenders, and smiths. Each ingot contains an invisible network of labour. Someone dug the ore, someone made the crucible, someone cut the fuel, someone watched the furnace through long hours, someone risked money to move the cargo, someone forged the blade slowly enough not to ruin it. The final object may sit in a ruler's hand. but it carries many fingerprints that will never be named. The making of woots also reminds you that technological brilliance does not always follow the path people expect. Industrial steelmaking will later produce enormous quantities, but here the achievement is small batch, controlled, and refined. Each crucible holds a limited amount. Each ingot has character. This is not mass production. It is disciplined repetition with room for surprise. A batch may delight or disappoint. A smith may praise one cake and curse another. The metal has a personality, which is a polite way of saying it can be troublesome. You stand near the doorway as evening settles. The market noise softens. A cooking fire nearby releases the smell of lentils, ghee, and smoke. The sky turns violet. Somewhere, a temple bell or distant call echoes through warm air. In the workshop, a blade is polished with patient strokes until the hidden pattern begins to appear. There is a moment when everyone leans in slightly, not dramatically. Craftspeople are careful with excitement, but the mood changes. The lines rise from the surface, subtle at first, then clearer, like a memory returning. You understand why people spoke of this steel with awe? It came from sealed fire, it crossed seas, it carried patterns that looked almost organic, as if the metal had grown rather than been made. It joined chemistry, geography, labour, and legend in one narrow shining edge. And because the exact chain of production could be disrupted by changing trade routes, depleted ore sources, lost workshop habits, or shifting demand, the old mastery became difficult to reproduce in the same way. The secret did not vanish in one dramatic puff of smoke. It thinned, scattered, and became harder to gather again. Night deepens around the town. The crucibles cool in the ash. The ingots wait in cloth and straw. The blades rest in shadow, their watered patterns hidden until light returns. You feel the warm dust on your feet and the fading heat on your hands. Somewhere beyond the market, a road leads to a port, and beyond the port, a sea carries metal toward distant names. Woods is small enough to pack in a crate, yet large enough to travel through imagination. It is steel as treasure, steel as rumour, steel as patient craft sealed inside clay and released by fire. You step into a medieval street just as morning lifts itself over tiled roofs and timber beams, as the world smells of horse sweat, wet straw, wood smoke, and fresh bread trying very hard to compete with the drains. The street is narrow, crowded, and loud in layers. Hooves strike stone. A cartwheel complains. A woman shakes dust from a cloth above the lane, with absolute confidence that gravity is someone else's problem. Somewhere nearby, a church bell sounds, slow and heavy, and the vibration seems to settle into your chest. You follow the sharper sound, the ringing of hammer against metal, until you reach a smithy tucked behind a row of market stalls. The doorway glows orange. Heat rolls out in waves, carrying the smell of charcoal, iron scale, leather, and old sweat trapped in the beams. Inside, blades hang from hooks, unfinished helmets sit on a bench, and strips of metal wait to become buckles, mail links, rivets, and fittings. Steel is no longer just a rare wonder in a sealed crucible. Here it is part of a wider world of defense, display, and power. You watch a swordsmith lift a heated bar from the fire. It shines a deep orange, bright enough to make the shadows flinch. The smith's hammer falls with steady confidence. The blade is drawn out, widened, straightened, and coaxed toward balance. A sword is not simply a long, sharp object, though some rulers have behaved as if that were the entire philosophy. It must carry weight properly. It must flex without failing. It must hold an edge. It must feel alive in the hand without being so lively that it tries to leave. A mainstream historical fact sits plainly here throughout the medieval period. Many European and Asian blades used combinations of iron and steel, with harder steel often placed at cutting edges and tougher iron or lower carbon steel supporting the body of the weapon. Different regions developed different solutions. Some smiths welded strips together, some created pattern-welded cores, some used imported crucible steel, some refined local blooms into better material. The goal was rarely pure beauty alone. The goal was a weapon that survived impact, resisted breaking, and made its owner feel slightly more confident in a world with limited dentistry. You feel the sword's grip when the smith passes a practice piece toward you. The leather wrapping is warm from the room and faintly sticky. Your fingers settle into ridges shaped by use. The blade has a presence, not magical exactly, but concentrated. It gathers fear, skill, status, and money into a single line of metal. You lift it carefully and notice how the point moves with the smallest turn of your wrist. The smith watches you with the calm patience of someone who has seen many visitors discover that swords are heavier than poetry suggests. Outside the workshop, a different form of steel and iron sings. You hear thousands of tiny rings shifting against one another as a mail shirt is lifted from a peg. Mail is made from interlinked metal rings, often riveted closed, and it drapes almost like heavy cloth. When you touch it, it feels cool, oily, and strangely fluid. It slides over your palm with a whispering metallic rasp. Proper mail can protect against cuts, though force can still bruise, break bones, or drive the breath from a body. Armour, like most useful things, is not a miracle. It is a negotiation with disaster. In another corner, plates of metal are being shaped over stakes. The hammering is slower here, deeper and rounder. A breastplate begins as a sheet, but through heat, force, and skill, it becomes a curved shell meant to turn blows aside. The armourer studies bodies as much as metal. Shoulders roll, elbows bend, necks turn. A knight who cannot move is not a warrior, just an expensive cupboard. The best armour allows motion. It distributes weight across the body, it protects joints with layers, hinges, straps, and clever overlaps. It also squeaks, pinches, and requires help to put on, because history enjoys balance. You walk through a castle yard where armed men practice with blunted weapons. Their feet scrape packed earth. Wooden shields thud. Metal helmets ring dully when struck. The air smells of mud, hay, sweat, and the sour breath of nervous horses. Steel shapes the scene, but not by itself. It belongs to training, wealth, food supply, horses, roads, smiths, miners, charcoal burners, and tax collectors, those quiet dragons of administration. A lord may boast of his armoured retinue, but someone has to pay for it, feed it, repair it, and listen to complaints about straps. Steel helps empires and kingdoms push outward, but it also helps them hold together. Edge tools cut timber for ships and fortifications. Iron nails bind planks. Steel chisels dress stone. Metal fittings strengthen gates. Locks protect storerooms. Axes clear land. Plough parts deepen farming. The military face of steel is dramatic. Yes, but the quieter face is everywhere. It is in the hinge that closes a chapel door, the knife that trims a quill, the awl that pierces leather, and the cauldron hook over a kitchen fire. A kingdom does not run on swords alone, no matter what heroic murals keep implying. Still, rulers love steel as theatre. You enter a great hall where polished weapons hang on walls and armour stands like silent guests who arrived too early. The firelight flickers across helmets and blades. Nobles admire workmanship, lineage, and sparkle. A sword may be given a name. A ruler may claim a blade came from an ancient hero, a saint, or a suspiciously convenient ancestor. Ceremonial swords become symbols of justice, sovereignty, and divine favour. They are carried in processions, laid across altars, raised during oaths. In these moments, Steel is no longer merely useful, it becomes language. Here is a quirky tidbit from the world of famous weapons, many legendary swords, from European royal blades to Japanese treasures, were believed to carry personalities, curses, sacred power, or impossible histories. Some were said to choose their wielders. Some were believed to protect dynasties. Some probably mostly protected the reputation of whoever owned them. The idea that a sword might have a soul sounds dramatic, but when an object takes months of skilled labour, costs a fortune, and may decide the mood of a battlefield, people are going to get sentimental. You cross into another workshop, this one quieter, where a Japanese swordsmith works with folded steel and iron sand smelted into bloom steel known as tamahagan. The atmosphere feels ceremonial, but also practical. The sound of hammering is crisp and controlled. Water trickles nearby. Charcoal smoke smells clean and dry. The steel is sorted by carbon content, broken, stacked, welded, folded, and shaped. The edge and body are treated differently, so the blade can be hard where it cuts, and more resilient where it must absorb shock. When clay is applied before quenching, different cooling rates help produce a visible temper line. The hamon. It is beautiful, yes, but beauty here grows from function, which is always the most convincing kind. Across the Islamic world, Central Asia, Europe, India, China, and Japan, metalworkers solve similar problems with different traditions. How do you make a blade hard but not brittle? How do you protect a rider without trapping him in a metal laundry basket? How do you produce enough weapons for armies without ruining quality? How do you repair armor quickly after use? How do you stop expensive steel from rusting in a damp castle where even the walls seem to have a cough? Historians still argue whether changes in armor cause changes in weapon design more often, or whether weapons pushed armor to evolve first in a constant contest of strike and protection. The answer probably shifts by region and century. A heavier lance encourages better plate. Stronger plate encourages crushing weapons, thrusting swords, and narrow points aimed at gaps. Crossbows and later firearms complicate the story. Innovation does not walk in a straight line. It circles, bumps into money, trips over tradition, and occasionally gets shoved forward by panic. You stand beside a battlefield at the edge of dusk, though the moment is calm enough to remain gentle. Banners hang heavy in the damp air. Men check buckles, test edges, and adjust helmets. Horses snort clouds into the cold. The smell is grass, leather, oil, smoke from campfires, and rain waiting in the clouds. Steel is everywhere, but so is uncertainty. A polished blade does not promise victory. A fine helmet does not remove fear. Metal may protect the body, but it cannot quiet the mind entirely. You notice the workers behind the scene. The armourer with burned fingers, the apprentice pulling wire for mail, the charcoal maker living at the forest edge, the miner emerging with dust in his hair, the woman stitching padded garments worn beneath armour, because metal against the body without padding is less protection and more personal insult. The leatherworker punches holes in straps. The merchant carries bars between towns. The ruler signs orders and pretends the bill is reasonable. Steel gathers society around itself. Night falls over the town. The smithy's glow remains, a square of orange in the dark street. Inside, the swordsmith sets a finished blade on a cloth and wipes it with oil. The smell rises clean and sharp. The blade reflects the flame in a long trembling line. It is made for violence, but also for ceremony, labour, inheritance, and myth nearby. A helmet waits for its lining. A mail shirt sleeps in a pile like silver netting. A chisel cools beside the hearth, just as important in its own quiet way. You step back into the street, where the sounds soften one by one. The market has closed. The horses are stabled. The bell no longer rings. Only the forge continues, breathing through the darkness. Steel has entered the halls of kings and the hands of soldiers, but it has also entered doors, tools, farms, ships, and workshops. It shines in legends, but it survives in maintenance and in the warm, smoky hush of the medieval night. You feel how this material does not simply arm empires. It organizes them, decorates them, feeds them, frightens them, and keeps their hinges from falling off. You enter a valley where the trees stand dark against a pale morning sky, and the air tastes of damp leaves, coal smoke, and cold water running over stone. The land is no longer shaped only by small hearths and village smithies. It is beginning to gather itself around larger fires, louder water wheels, deeper mines, and men with notebooks who look at a furnace and think, quite dangerously, that it could always be made bigger. You walk along a muddy track toward an ironworks. Your boots sink slightly into the wet ground. A stream rushes nearby, turning a wheel that groans with each rotation. The sound is wooden, rhythmic, and strangely sleepy, until the hammers begin. Then the valley wakes in metal. Huge tilt hammers rise and fall, powered by water, striking hot iron with a force no human arm could repeat for long. Boom, pause, boom. The sound rolls through your ribs and disappears into the hills. Smoke hangs low over the roofs. It smells different now. There is still charcoal with its dry woodland scent, but there is also the heavier smell of coal, sulphur, ash, and hot machinery. Early modern Europe is hungry for iron. Farms need tools, armies need cannon and shot, ships need nails, anchors, fittings, and chains, cities need grates, locks, hinges, beams, and stoves. The appetite grows, and the old furnaces, clever as they are, begin to feel small against the demands of expanding trade, war, and construction. You stand near a blast furnace, and it is not modest. It rises like a squat stone tower, patched with heat stains, its mouth glowing somewhere deep within. Ore, fuel, and limestone are charged from the top. Air is blasted in from below, first by bellows and later by stronger blowing engines. Inside, temperatures climb high enough for iron to melt and run down into channels. A mainstream historical fact settles into the heat around you. Blast furnaces made it possible to produce liquid cast iron in much larger quantities than bloomeries, creating pig iron that could be cast directly or refined into wrought iron. Liquid iron is a shocking thing when you first see it. It flows like orange sunlight poured onto earth. Workers guide it into sand moulds cut into the floor. Sparks spit outward. The air flashes hot against your face. You hear hissing, cracking, shouted instructions, and the thick bubbling sound of metal moving where metal should not seem able to move. It feels almost rude, honestly, for something so solid to behave like syrup. The moulds branch out from a central channel, and here comes the quirky little tidbit. The term pig iron is often explained by the shape of these sand channels, where smaller ingots seem to suckle from a larger central runner like piglets from a sow. It is a farmyard image for a furnace yard product, which is very human. Even in the middle of technical transformation, people look at glowing molten metal and somehow think, yes, baby pigs. History refuses to be completely dignified. You move closer to the casting floor, careful not to test the patience of molten iron. The heat strokes your shins through your clothing. Sand crunches underfoot. A worker's leather apron is stiff with soot and old burns. His hands are rough, his face shiny with sweat despite the chill outside. He knows the furnace by habit, sound, and flame. This is not yet a clean industrial system. It is dangerous, dirty, and filled with judgment calls. Too much impurity and the iron behaves badly. Too much sulphur from the wrong fuel, and quality suffers. Too little air, and production slows. Too much confidence, and everyone has a very exciting problem. For centuries, charcoal is the preferred fuel for iron making because it burns hot and clean enough for good work. But charcoal requires wood, and wood requires forests. You walk through a woodland where coppice trees have been cut and regrown in managed cycles. Charcoal burners live close to their smoky earth-covered piles, tending slow burns that turn wood into fuel without letting it become ash. Their world smells of damp bark, smoke, moss, and sleep lost in small pieces. They are essential, but they are also a sign of pressure. Iron eats forests. Ships eat forests. Houses eat forests. Everyone appears to be chewing on trees. In parts of Britain and continental Europe, the demand for fuel creates anxiety. Forests are managed, regulated, fought over, and priced with increasing care. Iron masters search for alternatives. Coal is abundant in some regions, but raw coal can introduce impurities into iron. The trick is coke. Coal baked in a low oxygen environment until many volatile compounds are driven off. Coke can support heavier furnace charges and provide intense heat. It changes the scale of iron making, especially in places where coal fields sit close to ore, limestone, water, and transport. You arrive at Coalbrookdale in Shropshire, where Abraham Darby and his family become famous for using coke successfully in blast furnace iron making in the early 18th century. The valley is damp, smoky, and practical. It does not look like a clean page in a textbook. It looks like mud, brick, smoke, ledgers, experiments, and people trying to make a furnace pay. Coke smelting is not an instant miracle spreading everywhere overnight. It takes work to adapt furnaces, improve quality, and find markets, but it opens a door to far larger production. Specialists still debate whether the success of coke iron in this period was mainly a technical breakthrough, a response to fuel scarcity, a result of local geography, or a business achievement tied to networks of skill and capital. That uncertainty is useful. It keeps the story from becoming too neat. In real workshops, invention is rarely a lonely genius winking at a candle. It is a quality, transport cost, family money, stubborn trial, good timing, and possibly one person saying, "What if we tried it again?" while everyone else quietly sighs. You walk through another centre of change, Sheffield, where steelmaking grows more refined. Here, iron bars can be converted into blister steel through the cementation process. Wrought iron is packed in charcoal powder inside long stone chests and heated for days. Carbon slowly enters the bars, raising their carbon content. When the bars come out, their surfaces are blistered, rough with marks caused by gases and reactions within the metal. The name is not poetic, but it is accurate. Blister steel looks as if it has survived an unpleasant fever. The smell inside a cementation furnace house is dry, hot, and enclosed. You hear the muffled roar of a fire through masonry. Workers peer through small openings, feed fuel, seal gaps, and wait. The process demands patience on an almost heroic scale. No one pulls out a sample every few minutes just because curiosity is itchy. Days pass while the bars change inside their beds of charcoal. The result can be broken, sorted, piled, welded, and refined into shear steel, useful for tools, springs, and blades. Then you enter a quieter, more controlled room where Benjamin Huntsman's crucible method begins to influence steel quality in the 18th century. Small pieces of blister steel are melted in closed clay crucibles, then poured into moulds, producing a more uniform cast steel. The heat is intense, the work exacting, and the crucibles fragile. The workers use long tongs to lift glowing vessels that look too small to carry such importance. The molten steel inside is bright, secretive, and expensive. This steel becomes prized for cutting tools, clock springs, and fine instruments, especially where consistency matters. You feel how the world is changing not only in scale, but in attitude. Metal is becoming measurable. Iron masters and steelmakers still rely on craft, but they also keep records, compare batches, guard recipes, and chase improvements. The workshop becomes part of a wider system of mines, roads, canals, ports, financiers, patents, and military contracts. A furnace is no longer just a local fire. It is a node in a growing network, pulling in raw materials and sending out bars, plates, castings, tools, and ambitions, yet the human body remains close to every stage. You watch men breaking ore, charging furnaces, tapping metal, rolling bars, and hauling fuel. Their clothes smell of smoke even when washed. Their eyes redden from heat and dust. Their arms know the weight of tongs. Their ears know the warning sounds hidden under ordinary noise. A furnace yard has its own weather sparks like brief stars, steam rising from wet ground, ash drifting onto hair, sudden waves of heat followed by cold air from the valley. You pass a counting house where ledgers lie open beside an ink pot. The pages smell faintly of paper, dust, and wax. Numbers march across them in columns, tons of ore, loads of coal, wages paid, iron sold. This is another kind of furnace, less dramatic but just as hungry. It turns labour and fuel into profit, debt, expansion, and risk. The modern world is beginning to require not only metal, but systems capable of producing metal predictably. Large furnaces demand large organisation. Fire is becoming industrial. Outside, rain begins softly. It taps on slate roofs and darkens the mud. The furnace glow remains steady, orange behind drifting smoke. Water runs in little channels between your feet. The valley smells of wet ash and hot iron, a strange mixture of storm and flame. You realise that steel is moving away from rarity and toward abundance, but it has not yet become cheap enough to remake everything. The furnaces are larger, the methods more controlled, the fuel more powerful, yet the greatest leap still waits inside the raw. For now, you stand in the early modern ironworks and let the sounds settle around you. Water wheel, hammer, bellows, rain, furnace. Men call to one another in tired voices. A cart creaks under a load of pig iron. Smoke folds into the low clouds. The fires have grown hungry, and Europe is learning to feed them with forests, coalfields, capital, and nerve. In this smoky valley, iron is no longer merely made. It is organised, scaled, refined, and prepared for a world that will soon ask for more metal than any quiet hillside should reasonably be expected to provide. You stand beside a pear-shaped vessel of iron and fire, and the ground seems to tremble with anticipation. The building around you is vast, smoky, and alive with movement. Chains clank overhead. Men shout through heat and noise. Railcars rattle in from the yard carrying pig iron, limestone, and scrap. The air smells of coal smoke, hot brick, machine oil, sweat, and scorched dust. It is not the cosy glow of a village forge. It is not the careful quiet of a crucible room. This is industry with its sleeves rolled up, its face blackened, and its manners left somewhere outside. The converter waits tilted on its trunnions, enormous and hollow, lined with refractory material that must survive punishment from molten metal. It looks almost sleepy for a moment, like some gigantic iron fruit waiting to be filled. Then the molten pig iron arrives, bright and orange-white, carried in a ladle that swings with terrifying dignity. You feel the heat before you fully see the pour. It presses against your cheeks, dries your lips, and makes the hair on your arms lift beneath your clothing. When the liquid iron streams into the converter, it sounds thick, heavy, and unstoppable, like a river made of sunrise. A mainstream historical fact sits right at the centre of this roaring hall. Henry Bessemer patented his steelmaking process in Britain in 1856, and the Bessemer converter made steel far cheaper by blowing air through molten pig iron to remove excess carbon and other impurities. The oxygen in the air reacts with carbon in the iron, producing heat and gases. The surprising beauty of the process is that, once started properly, the chemical reactions help keep the metal hot. The converter does not merely hold fire, it becomes fire. The vessel is turned upright, air blasts through holes in the bottom. At once, the quiet is gone. A white plume explodes from the mouth of the converter, full of sparks, flame and smoke. The sound is immense, not just loud, but physical. A deep, continuous roar fills your chest and teeth. The floor vibrates beneath your boots. The flame at the top changes colour as the carbon burns away, and experienced workers watch that flame with intense attention. They read it the way sailors read clouds. Too soon, and the steel remains wrong. Too late, and the metal may become overblown, stripped too far, needing correction. You can feel why the process seemed almost theatrical. In less than half an hour, a charge of molten pig iron could become steel. Not perfect steel for every purpose, not automatically, and not without headaches. But compared with the older methods that took days or demanded small batches, this speed was astonishing. The converter screams, sparks fly, flames leap upward, and somewhere in the middle of all that noise, chemistry performs a very profitable trick. The quirky tidbit is that Bessemer originally stumbled toward the idea while trying to improve artillery. He wanted stronger cannon, which is a wonderfully human way for a peaceful bridge-building material to arrive with military paperwork attached, across the Atlantic. An American ironmaker named William Kelly had also experimented with air-blown refining, leading to disputes and overlapping claims. Innovation, once again, arrives wearing more than one hat and immediately asks for a lawyer. You walk along a viewing platform above the shop floor, though viewing may be too calm a word. Below, men move with practiced urgency. Their faces glow orange in the converter light, then vanish into shadow. One wipes sweat from his brow with a sleeve already stiff with ash. Another signals with a raised arm. The air tastes metallic, dry, and faintly bitter. Every object seems coated in black dust. Even the windows, high above, have become dim grey squares. Outside, the daylight exists in theory. The process is powerful, but it is picky. Early Bessemer converters worked best with pig iron low in phosphorus and sulphur. Certain ores produced better results than others, which meant geography mattered intensely. A place with the right ore could make steel cheaply. A place with phosphorus-rich ore faced disappointment unless new methods intervened. Later, the basic Bessemer process, using a lining that could handle phosphorus removal, widened the range of usable ores. But in these early years, the converter is both revolutionary and irritatingly selective, like a genius who refuses to eat anything but one kind of soup. You watch as the blow nears its end, the flame changes, the roar shifts. Workers know the moment. The air blast stops, and the sudden reduction in sound is almost shocking. Your ears ring in the new quiet, the converter tilts, and molten steel pours out in a bright stream, smoother than the pig iron that entered, ready for additions that restore desired carbon and improve quality. It flows into ladles, then moulds, where it becomes ingots. Steam and sparks rise. The smell is wet sand, hot metal, and a sharp mineral edge that seems to sit at the back of your throat. Researchers still debate how much credit should belong to Bessemer's patent, Kelly's experiment, earlier metallurgical knowledge, or the many unnamed workers who turned an idea into reliable production. That uncertainty matters because the converter is not only a machine, it is a system. A patent can describe a principle, but working steel requires lining materials, suitable iron, trained crews, testing methods, finance, fuel, transport, and customers willing to trust the product. History loves a single name because it fits nicely on plaques. The shop floor knows better. Now steel begins to lose its aura of rarity. It becomes a material of quantity. Rails are one of its first great triumphs. Iron rails wear out under heavy traffic, bending, cracking, and demanding constant replacement. Steel rails last longer and carry heavier loads. You walk to a railway yard where new rails lie stacked in long straight lines, smelling of oil, rain, and fresh scale. When a worker strikes one with a hammer, the note rings bright and confident. Locomotives nearby breathe steam into the morning, and the rails wait to stretch across landscapes, linking mines, ports, factories, farms, and cities. The change feels simple, but it is not. Cheaper steel rails reduce transport costs. Better transport feeds factories. Factories demand more steel. More steel builds more rails, bridges, machines, and ships. It is a circle, and once it begins turning, it pulls whole societies along with it. Coal moves more easily, wheat travels farther, people migrate, newspapers spread. Time itself becomes more standardized because trains, rudely, prefer schedules. Steel does not only build tracks, it helps build a faster world. You stand near a rolling mill where heated ingots are squeezed between great rolls, lengthened and shaped into rails, bars, plates, and beams. The sound is lower than hammering, more continuous, a groan mixed with thunder. Red-hot steel slides along rollers like a glowing ribbon. Men use hooks and tongs to guide it, stepping back from the breath of heat. Water sprays and bursts into steam. The air becomes damp and hot, like a storm trapped indoors. Scale flakes off in black curls underfoot, crunching softly when you move. Cities feel the change too. Structural steel becomes cheaper and more available, allowing larger bridges, stronger buildings, longer spans, and new kinds of engineering confidence. You see bridge parts stacked beside a river, rivets waiting in barrels, plates marked with chalk, cranes turning slowly against a grey sky. A bridge made with steel can reach where older materials struggle. It can carry rail traffic, foot traffic, goods, ambitions, and occasionally people who stop halfway just to admire the view, pretending they are not nervous about height. Ships grow stronger and larger as steel plates replace iron and wood in many uses. In a shipyard, the smell changes again. Salt air, tar, paint, hot rivets, and wet rope. Plates hang from cranes like giant dark leaves. Riveters work in teams, heating rivets until they glow, tossing or passing them with alarming skill, hammering them tight while the hull echoes like a drum. The rhythm is fast, metallic, and almost musical. Steel gives ships strength, but it also gives shipyards a new scale of labour. The modern vessel is not crafted by one master alone. It is assembled by crowds. Weapons also change, yasta, because every major material improvement eventually receives a grim invitation. Stronger steel makes better gun barrels, armour plate, shells, and military transport. Yet the same converters that feed armories also feed rails, bridges, farm equipment, tools, and machines. Steel refuses to have a single moral meaning. It is obedient to the hand that shapes it, which is not always comforting. It can carry grain or carry guns. It can hold up a hospital roof or line a battleship. The metal is strong. The choices around it are less simple. You return to the converter shop at night. The building glows through smoke, a furnace-lit cathedral of labour. The noise rises again as another charge begins. Men move in silhouettes against flame. The converter roars, and sparks fountain upward in bright showers, fading before they reach the rafters. Your skin feels dusty and warm. Your ears hold the echo of iron becoming steel in minutes. There is something hypnotic in the violence of the process. Air, an invisible and ordinary thing, is forced through molten metal, and the result is transformation at industrial speed. The converter does not whisper its secret. It shouts it. It makes steel cheaper, faster, and more available than most earlier generations could imagine. The world that once waited days for small batches now watches tons of metal pour in a single night. You step away from the heat toward the open yard. Cool air touches your face, carrying soot, rain, and distant steam. Behind you, the converter still breathes fire. Ahead, rails disappear into darkness, straight and patient. On those rails will move ore, food, workers, letters, soldiers, machines, and dreams of cities not yet built. Steel has become a river now, flowing from converters into mills, from mills into infrastructure, from infrastructure into daily life. And in the roar of that pear-shaped vessel, the modern world finds one of its loudest heartbeats. You walk into a city that seems to be learning how to stretch. It is dawn, and the streets are damp from night rain. Horses snort beside delivery carts. Electric lamps fade into pale morning. Above you, iron signs creak in a mild wind, and somewhere below the pavement, pipes tick and sigh like a hidden mechanical animal. The air smells of coal smoke, wet brick, fresh-cut timber, horse manure, machine oil, and coffee drifting from a shop where early workers stand with both hands wrapped around warm cups, looking as if civilization has asked too much of them before breakfast. The rails come first into your senses. They are not romantic from close range. They are hard, oily, cold under the palm, and set into gravel that bites through thin soles. A locomotive rolls toward the platform with a slow iron breathing, steam lifting around its wheels in pale clouds. The whistle rises, long and lonely, then breaks across the station roof. People gather with bundled trunks, letters, lunch tins, tired children, and the fixed expression of anyone who has trusted a timetable. Steel rails run outward from this station in straight lines, curved lines, branch lines, and sidings, threading towns into a network that feels almost like a nervous system. A mainstream historical fact stands here plainly in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Steel rails replaced many iron rails because they lasted longer under heavy loads, and this made large railway systems more durable and economical. The railway does not only move passengers, it moves coal to furnaces, grain to ports, timber to factories, newspapers to towns, and time itself into stricter order. Once trains cross long distances, noon can no longer be whatever the local sun politely suggests. Stations, companies, and governments begin standardizing time, which is useful, though it does make humanity slightly easier to hurry. You board a carriage and feel the wooden seat press against your back. The fabric smells of dust, wool, and old tobacco. The train jerks once, then settles into motion. Wheels strike joints in the track with a steady rhythm. Clack, 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 like a lullaby made by engineers. Outside, fields slide by. Telegraph poles flick past one after another. The rails carry you over bridges, through cuttings, beside rivers, and into cities where goods arrive faster than markets can gossip about them. Steel becomes distance made manageable. It shortens the map without folding it. The quirky tidbit is tucked inside those early railway stations. Some companies employed people whose work was to keep station clocks synchronized, while passengers often complained that railway time felt unnatural, bossy, and suspiciously modern. Imagine being angry at a clock for having ambitions. Yet they had a point. The railway did not merely change transport, it changed the feeling of a day. Trains made minutes count in new ways, and steel rails became lines of discipline laid across countryside. You step off in a city that is growing upward. The streets are crowded with wagons, streetcars, pedestrians, newspaper boys, and clerks carrying ledgers. The noise is continuous hoofbeats, bells, shouted prices, construction hammers, steam engines, and the deep rumble of elevated trains passing above intersections like impatient thunder. Look up, and the skyline is no longer content with church steeples and domes. Buildings are beginning to climb. Here, steel becomes vertical. Older masonry buildings can be tall, but the walls at the bottom must grow thick to support the weight above. Stone and brick are strong in compression, but they become heavy masters. A steel frame changes the arrangement. Instead of walls bearing nearly everything, a skeleton of columns and beams carries the load, while exterior walls can hang more lightly from the structure. Add elevators, fireproofing, foundations, plate glass, finance, and urban land prices that behave like fever dreams, and suddenly the city discovers the sky is rentable. You enter a construction site in Chicago or New York around the turn of the 20th century. The ground is churned mud and wooden planks. Your hand brushes a riveted column, cool in the morning shade and rough where scale remains. Above, steelworkers balance on beams with a calm that seems frankly rude to gravity. They walk narrow flanges high above the street, carrying tools, guiding hoisted girders, and signalling to crane operators. The city below shrinks into noise and movement. The wind smells of river water, smoke, tar, and lunch pails opened too early. One girder rises slowly on a cable, swaying as if thinking about mischief. Men with taglines steady it. A foreman shouts. The piece moves into place, and for a moment the whole site holds its breath, then holds a line. Bolts slide through, and soon hot rivets arrive, glowing orange from a portable forge. A rivet is tossed, caught in a metal can or with tongs, inserted and hammered tight. The sound is bright and furious, a rapid metallic rattle that echoes between walls. Steel does not make the skyline quietly. It argues its way upward. Scholars still debate whether the home insurance building of Chicago, completed in 1885, should be called the first skyscraper, because its structure mixed metal framing with masonry, and because height, elevators, fire safety, and urban function all complicate the definition. That uncertainty is a gift. It reminds you that a skyscraper is not just a tall object. It is a bundle of technologies and habits. The elevator must be trusted. The frame must be protected from fire. The foundations must handle weight. The windows must bring light deep into rented floors. The office worker must be persuaded to spend daylight in stacked rooms rather than at human level, which is perhaps the boldest engineering challenge of all. You ride an early elevator upward. It shudders gently, enclosed by polished wood, brass fittings, and a faint smell of varnish and machine grease. The operator stands beside the control lever, dignified as a small ship captain in a box. The floor sinks away. Your stomach notices. A woman in a hat stares straight ahead, bravely pretending her organs have not just filed a complaint. When the doors open, you step into an upper office where light pours across desks, typewriters, ink stands, and wire baskets filled with papers. The city spreads below in haze and sunlight. The steel frame is hidden behind walls and plaster, but it is holding you in the air. The modern office grows with steel. So do department stores, hotels, train sheds, warehouses, and exhibition halls. Large steel trusses create wide interior spaces where crowds can gather. Goods can be displayed, and machines can operate without forests of support columns. You walk through a vast railway terminal where the roof arches overhead in ribs of metal and glass. Rain taps softly on the panes. Steam drifts beneath the roof and turns sunlight into milky shafts. Footsteps overlap in every direction. Porters call out. A suitcase wheel squeaks. Steel makes a public room large enough for thousands of private departures. Bridges become another form of steel ambition. You stand beside a river where a great span rises from stone piers, its cables, trusses, or arches dark against the sky. The water below smells of mud, coal smoke, and fish. Wind presses your coat against your arms. Traffic passes with a low vibration through the deck and into your feet. Steel can be tension and compression, cable and beam, arch and lattice. It lets engineers cross wider waters, deeper valleys, and busier harbours. Cities on opposite banks begin to feel like one place, which is convenient for commerce, and inconvenient for anyone hoping to avoid relatives. A bridge is never just metal, it is calculation, risk, politics, money, and maintenance. Paint crews hang from ropes. Inspectors tap members and search for cracks. Workers tighten, replace, scrape, and repaint. Steel may be strong, but it does not free humanity from chores. It simply creates more dramatic chores at greater heights. The smell of bridge paint, sharp and chemical, mixes with river wind. The metal under your hand feels cold, even in sunlight, as if it is storing the night inside itself. Factories spread along rail lines and waterfronts. Inside them, steel shafts, gears, frames, presses, boilers, and tools keep production moving. You walk through one where cotton, cans, bicycles, sewing machines, or farm equipment emerge in ordered stages. Belts slap overhead, floors tremble. Oil darkens the wood planks. The air is warm with metal, dust, and human effort. Steel tools cut other materials with repeatable precision, and steel machines shape more steel parts. A kind of industrial self-multiplication. The material becomes both product and producer. In the countryside, steel rails and steel tools change farming. Stronger ploughs cut heavier soils. Mechanical harvesters and tractors begin altering the rhythm of rural labour. Wire fences divide land into straighter boundaries. Windmills pump water. Steel buckets, springs, saws, and nails enter daily life with little ceremony. You hear a gate latch click shut in a quiet field, and it carries the same material story as the skyscraper beam, only in a softer voice. Yet abundance brings shadows. Railways can bind countries together, but they can also carry armies, extract resources, and push into lands whose inhabitants did not ask for steel lines across their home. Skyscrapers can symbolize opportunity, but also speculation, crowded labour, and dangerous work. The steel city is dazzling from a distance. Up close, it smells of soot and risk. Men fall from beams. Workers lose hearing in mills. Neighbourhoods darken under elevated tracks. Progress, as usual, arrives with excellent posture and unpaid bills. By evening, you stand on a high rooftop. The city glows beneath you. Streetlights flicker on one by one. Trains move like lit serpents through stations and across bridges. Smoke lifts from chimneys, softening the horizon. Somewhere below, a steel-framed building hums with offices emptying for the day. Somewhere farther out, rails carry sleepers through the dark, their bodies rocked by wheels while sparks flick from the locomotive stack. The world has become connected by hard, bright lines and lifted by hidden skeletons. You place your hand on a rooftop railing. It is smooth from weather, cold against your palm, and faintly damp from evening mist. Beneath its painted surface and steel waits without drama, doing the work. That is its great habit now. It disappears into usefulness. It holds floors above streets, bridges above rivers, rails across plains, roofs over crowds, machines inside factories, and fences around fields. It becomes so common that people stop noticing it, which may be the highest compliment a building material can receive. The wind rises slightly. You hear the far whistle of a train, softened by distance until it seems less like machinery and more like memory. The still city does not sleep fully. It murmurs, ticks, rattles, and glows in every direction. The material has stretched human movement outward and human shelter upward. It has given the modern world a skeleton, tracks, joints, ribs, and nerves. And as night gathers between the buildings, you feel the quiet strangeness of standing inside a civilization that has learned to climb on metal bones. You enter a steelworks under a sky the colour of old pewter, and the first thing you notice is the sound. It does not arrive as one noise, but as a whole weather system of a noise. Furnaces roar, cranes grind overhead, rails clatter beneath loaded wagons. Hammers strike with a force that seems to shake dust out of the rafters. Men shout, whistles blow, and somewhere a siren gives a long, tired wail that makes everyone move a little faster. The air smells of coal smoke, hot oil, wet wool, scorched metal, and rain steaming off blackened yard stones. Soot settles on your sleeves like dark snow. Your throat feels dry. Your skin feels both chilled by the weather and warmed by the furnaces, which is the body's way of saying it would appreciate a clearer decision. This is steel in wartime, not steel as a polished blade on a noble wall, and not steel as a clean beam holding a bright office in the air. This steel is measured in tons, deadlines, contracts, national fear, and exhausted shifts. It enters shells, ships, helmets, rails, trucks, tanks, wire, field kitchens, bridges, factories, and the small tools that keep all the larger machines from becoming useless heaps of patriotic scrap. A mainstream historical fact stands in the smoke around you. During the First and Second World Wars, steel production became central to military power because modern armies depended on artillery, ships, vehicles, railways, weapons, armour plate, and industrial machinery. War did not merely consume steel, it reorganised entire economies around steel. Ore, coal, labour, transport, finance, and engineering were pulled into one vast furnace of national urgency. You walk through a rolling mill where red-hot slabs move along rollers with a slow, glowing menace. They are pressed thinner, longer, flatter, becoming plate for ships or armour. Water sprays onto the surface and bursts into white steam. The smell is sharp and mineral, like wet stone struck by lightning. A worker steps back from the heat, face shining beneath a cap, his eyes narrowed against sparks. He has done this for hours. He will do it again tomorrow, unless tomorrow has been cancelled by history, which in wartime does occasionally feel possible. The plates travel to shipyards, and you follow them there. The sea air arrives first, salty and cold, mixed with tar, paint, rope, and the bitter smoke of cutting torches. Hulls rise on the slipways like unfinished iron cliffs. Men crawl across them, hammering, riveting, welding, measuring, shouting. Steel plates become destroyers, cruisers, submarines, cargo ships, and landing craft. A ship is not only a weapon or a transport. It is a floating argument with the ocean, and steel gives that argument a chance. You place your palm against a ship plate before it is lifted into position. It is cold, slightly damp, and gritty under your fingers. Later, after riveting or welding, it will become part of a hull that hears waves, engines, alarms, and footsteps. It may carry troops or grain. It may carry fuel. It may carry letters from home in a mailbag that smells faintly of paper and hope. Steel is not sentimental, but people make it carry sentimental things. In an armaments factory, the atmosphere tightens. Rows of machines cut, bore, press, polish, and inspect. Steel tubes become gun barrels. Steel casings become shells. Steel helmets are stamped in great numbers, each one identical enough to be useful and personal enough to matter terribly to the person wearing it. The factory floor smells of cutting oil, hot filings, tobacco smoke, and soap from the washroom. The machinery has a rhythm that can almost lull you until you remember what the parts are for. There is a strange tenderness in some wartime steel objects. A helmet, for example, is made by stamping a sheet into a shallow bowl, trimming it, fitting a liner, adding straps. It is simple compared with a tank or ship, but it sits close to the human head. It is touched by hands, scratched by weather, dented by accident, painted, marked, lost, found. In quiet moments, soldiers use helmets as wash basins, cooking pots, seats, or containers for whatever will fit. Steel designed for danger becomes, with very little ceremony, part of daily survival. Here comes a quirky tidbit from the darker theatre of war during the Second World War. Some British deception units used inflatable dummy tanks, fake vehicle tracks, and sound effects to mislead enemies about troop movements. Steel was so important that even the illusion of steel became useful. Imagine building fake tanks to convince someone you have more real tanks somewhere else. It is a deeply strange form of military theatre, and yet in war, theatre can move armies. You stand beside a real tank as mechanics work around it. The machine smells of fuel, grease, mud, hot metal, and stale air from inside the crew compartment. Its tracks are heavy steel links, caked with earth. When it starts, the engine coughs, then growls. The vibration travels through the ground into your feet. Armor plate gives the vehicle its brutal confidence, though even thick steel is never absolute protection. Better guns lead to thicker armor. Thicker armor leads to stronger engines. Stronger engines require more fuel. More fuel requires more supply trucks. War has a talent for turning every answer into another problem. Specialists continue to debate whether steel quality, production volume, logistics, or design choices mattered most in determining the success of armoured vehicles and naval forces during major 20th century conflicts. The answer shifts by country, campaign, and moment. A tank with excellent armour is not much use without fuel. A ship with fine steel cannot fight without trained crews. A factory can produce thousands of vehicles, but poor transport can leave them far from where they are needed. Steel is essential, but it never acts alone. You move away from the machines and into the lives of workers. The steel industry during wartime draws in women, migrants, older men, young apprentices, engineers, clerks, inspectors, cooks, cleaners, and guards. In one factory, a woman in overalls checks shell casings with a gauge, her fingers quick and exact, her hair is tied beneath a scarf, her face is calm, but her shoulders carry fatigue. The gauge clicks, a casing passes, another does not. Precision is not glamorous here. It is repetitive, necessary, and unforgiving. In the locker room, damp coats hang in rows. The smell is wool, metal dust, soap, and tired bodies. Someone has pinned a photograph beside a mirror. Someone else has left a sandwich wrapped in paper. The floor is gritty under your shoes. Outside, posters speak in bold slogans about duty, sacrifice, victory, and production. Inside, people rub their wrists, share cigarettes, complain about supervisors, and return to the line. History often remembers generals by name. Steel remembers shifts. Railways carry the war through the landscape. Steel rails move troops, coal, ammunition, wounded men, food, horses, fuel, and machines. Stations become crowded with uniforms and anxious families. You stand on a platform at night, lit by shaded lamps. The air smells of steam, smoke, damp coats, and tea poured too quickly. A train waits with dark windows. Boots scrape the platform. A child waves. The whistle sounds, and the carriages begin to move. The rails sing under the weight, carrying private sorrow into public events. Steel also appears in barbed wire, that thin, cruel invention of twisted strands and sharp points. You see coils stacked beside a supply road, dull grey under rain. They rattle when moved, a dry metallic whisper. Barbed wire does not have the grandeur of a battleship or the mechanical drama of a tank, but it shapes movement, fear, and territory. It turns open ground into a question. It makes space hostile. Sometimes the most influential steel is not massive. Sometimes it is thin, cheap, and patient, yet even in wartime, still serves repair. Engineers build temporary bridges from steel sections. Mechanics patch vehicles. Railway crews replace damaged track. Shipyard workers return torn vessels to service. You watch welders at night. Their arcs glowing blue-white in the dark. The light flickers on their masks and on puddles at their feet. The smell is hot flux, ozone, and rain. Sparks fall like brief golden insects. Welding feels almost intimate compared with the vastness of war. A hand guides a torch, a seam closes, metal joins metal, and a broken thing may move again. There is no peaceful innocence in this section of Steel's story, but there is human endurance. People make the metal, shape it, load it, ride in it, hide behind it, repair it, and fear it. Steel gives armies reach and force, but it also gives civilians shelter frames, hospital beds, surgical instruments, stretchers, water pipes, field stoves, and ambulances. It can destroy a bridge, and it can rebuild one. It can become shrapnel, and it can become the operating table where a life is saved. The material does not choose. Humans choose, under pressure, confusion, courage, anger, orders, and hope. Late at night, the steelworks continues. The furnaces glow behind dirty windows. Rain falls through smoke and turns ash into black paste along the yard. Workers leaving the shift move slowly. Lunch, tins in hand. Faces pale where goggles cover their skin and dark everywhere else. Their boots make heavy sounds on wet ground. Behind them, another crew enters, buttoning coats, lowering caps, stepping toward the orange light. You stand at the edge of the yard and listen to the mill breathe. It is not gentle, but from a distance its rhythm becomes almost steady enough to calm the mind. Roar, clank, hiss, roll, roar, clank, hiss, roll. Steel in wartime is terrible, necessary, overpraised, overworked, and impossible to ignore. It carries the weight of nations, but also the weight of individual hands. And beneath the smoke, beneath the slogans, beneath the machines that shake the ground, you sense the tired human pulse behind the metal, keeping time with the furnaces until morning comes grey and quiet over the roofs. You enter a laboratory where the world of steel suddenly becomes cleaner, quieter, and a little more suspiciously well lit. The air no longer tastes of furnace smoke and coal dust. It smells of alcohol, polish, warm electrical wiring, and rain tapping softly against tall windows. Glass bottles line shelves. Metal samples rest on labelled trays. A clock ticks with delicate certainty. Somewhere, a small burner gives a blue whisper of flame, and the sound feels almost shy compared with the huge industrial roars that once shook the ground. On the table in front of you lies a piece of steel that does not look heroic. It is smooth, pale, and reflective, catching the light with a cool shine. When you touch it, the surface feels firm and faintly cold, but not oily, not scaled, not rough from the forge. It seems almost too calm. This is the strange promise of stainless steel, a metal that can stand in kitchens, hospitals, factories, trains, restaurants, and laboratories without surrendering quickly to rust. A material made for modern cleanliness, modern precision, and modern impatience with scrubbing. A mainstream historical fact gleams at the centre of the room. Stainless steel contains chromium, usually at least about 10.5%, and that chromium forms a thin protective oxide layer on the surface, helping the steel resist corrosion. The layer is wonderfully quiet. It is not a thick shell. It is not a visible coat of armour. It is a nearly invisible film that reforms when scratched, as long as oxygen is present. Steel, that old child of fire and carbon, has learned a neat little trick. It can heal its own skin. You watch a researcher polish a sample until it reflects the window like pale water. The cloth moves in slow circles. The sound is soft, almost papery. Outside, a tram rattles past on wet rails. Inside, the researcher examines the surface, then dips the sample into a solution meant to test its resistance. There is a faint chemical smell, sharp and clean. The sample sits without obvious drama. That is the entire point. Some of the most important technologies in history are not the ones that explode, shout, or glow. They are the ones that simply refuse to be ruined by breakfast, weather, blood, acid, soap, and time. You drift into Sheffield in the early 20th century, where Harry Brearley is often credited with developing a practical stainless steel in 1913 while working on corrosion-resistant alloys. The story begins not with fancy cutlery, but with attempts to improve gun barrels. Because steel history has an annoying habit of walking through the armoury on its way to the kitchen drawer. Brearley noticed that certain chromium steels resisted etching and rusting. Soon, the possibility of stain-resisting knives caught attention, especially in a city already famous for cutlery. A blade that did not stain easily was not merely convenient. It felt modern, hygienic, and slightly superior at dinner. Here comes a quirky tidbit. Polished and waiting early stainless cutlery was sometimes marketed as rustless steel, before stainless steel became the phrase people preferred. Rustless was perhaps more honest, but stainless had a glamour. It sounded cleaner, brighter, almost moral. A spoon could now suggest purity, humanity, never missing a chance to flatter itself through tableware. Accepted this development with enthusiasm. You step into a cutlery workshop where the new alloy is being worked into knives. The room smells of grinding dust, oil, damp wool, and metal polish. Wheels spin, belts hum. Blades touch abrasives with a controlled hiss. Tiny sparks appear and vanish. A worker tests a knife against the light, looking for flaws along the edge. Stainless steel is not always easier to make or shape. Some alloys are tougher to forge, harder on tools, or more demanding in heat treatment. The reward is durability in the damp, acidic, messy world of human meals. Vinegar, fruit juice, dishwater, and neglect no longer win so easily. You find yourself in a hospital corridor where stainless steel has changed the atmosphere entirely. The floor is polished. The walls smell faintly of disinfectant. A wheeled cart rolls toward you with a gentle metallic rattle. On it lie trays, forceps, scissors, clamps, needles, and bowls, all shining under white light. The touch of a tray is cool and smooth. It makes a small ringing note when set down. Stainless steel does not make a medicine safe by itself. Of course, hygiene depends on procedures, sterilization, training, and careful hands. But corrosion-resistant instruments are easier to clean, easier to sterilize, and less likely to degrade in ways that trap contamination. In places where cleanliness matters, surface matters, academic specialists still debate how much the rise of stainless steel depended on one named inventor, how much on parallel experiments in Britain, Germany, France, and the United States, and how much on earlier metallurgical research into chromium alloys. That uncertainty is not a flaw in the story. It is the story doing what technology usually does, spreading through workshops, laboratories, patents, accidents, journals, companies, and people who all claim they were nearly first. The shiny object on the tray may look simple, but its ancestry is crowded. You move from hospital to kitchen and the mood warms. Steam clouds the windows, garlic sizzles in a pan, water runs over a sink with a hollow rush. Stainless steel counters reflect lamplight, chopped herbs, and the quick motion of hands. A refrigerator door closes with a soft seal. A mixing bowl rings when a spoon strikes its side. Here, the alloy becomes intimate. It touches food, water, fingers, heat, and soap. It appears in pots, sinks, knives, kettles, strainers, ovens, coffee machines, and restaurant services wiped down at midnight by someone whose patience has become very thin. Stainless steel is not only one material, it is a family of alloys. Some contain nickel, improving for mobility and corrosion resistance. Some are magnetic, some are not. Some are designed for heat, some for chemical plants, some for knives, some for architecture, some for surgical implants. You stand in a room lined with samples, each tagged with numbers and letters that look dull until you realize they are recipes. Tiny changes in chromium, nickel, molybdenum, carbon, manganese, and other elements can alter behavior. Metallurgy becomes a kind of cooking, except the oven is terrifying and the cookies become pressure vessels. You enter a chemical plant where stainless piping twists through the space like silver vines, pumps thrum, valves click. The air smells of steam, solvents, and hot insulation. Workers in helmets move along walkways, checking gauges. The pipes carry liquids that would punish ordinary steel. Corrosion is not merely ugly here, it is dangerous, expensive, and deeply inconvenient, which is one of industry's most persuasive categories. Stainless alloys help manage acids, heat, moisture, and cleaning cycles. They make modern processing possible in food, pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, brewing, dairy, and countless other systems where cleanliness and resistance are not luxuries. Then the world becomes smaller and more precise. You find stainless steel in wristwatches, fountain pens, camera bodies, springs, razors, and scientific instruments. A watch bracelet lies across your palm, cool and flexible, each link moving with a tiny whisper. A razor glints beside a bathroom sink, light as a feather but sharpened to a disciplined edge. A fountain pen clip springs back into place with a satisfying snap. Steel no longer belongs only to bridges, rails, and beams. It belongs to pockets, wrists. Pockets again, because someone always puts tools in the wrong pocket. And the quiet rituals of daily life. The alloy also becomes architectural. You stand near a building whose stainless panels catch clouds and city lights. The surface changes with the weather. Silver in morning, grey in rain, golden at sunset. It does not shout like painted decoration. It reflects. In the 20th century, stainless steel appears in monuments, train cars, elevators, facades, and Art Deco details, giving modern design a sleek, sanitary, futuristic mood. Touch a stainless elevator wall and it holds the chill of the building. Tap it lightly and the sound is thin, controlled, urban. It is the sound of lobbies, stations, airports, and office towers pretending they are immune to chaos. But stainless steel is not immortal. Chlorides can attack certain grades. Poor cleaning can stain it. Heat can change its surface. Bad choices in alloy selection can lead to failure. The name stainless is a promise with footnotes. In salty marine air, in swimming pool structures, in chemical systems, the wrong grade may suffer. This is one of the quiet lessons of modern materials. No metal escapes context. Even the bright, confident alloy needs the right environment, the right design, and someone willing to read the specification rather than merely admire the shine. You pass into an operating room at night, prepared but empty. The light is dimmed. Stainless instruments rest in wrapped trays. A sink stands silent. The room smells faintly of sterile packaging and clean surfaces. There is something calming in the order of it all. The metal is not dramatic, but it carries trust. It waits to be washed, heated, handled, placed, used, and cleaned again. The same alloy family that serves spoons and brewery tanks also serves the delicate boundary between illness and care. At last, you return to the laboratory table. The rain has eased. The window glass is dark, reflecting the room back at itself. The stainless sample still lies in its tray, quiet, hard, and pale. Its brilliance is not the flashing beauty of a legendary blade, nor the raw power of a converter flame. It is the beauty of resistance, of surfaces that endure touch, water, salt, soap, heat, and repetition. You breathe in the clean chemical hush of the room and listen to the clock continue its patient ticking. Steel has become brighter, subtler, and more personal. It has entered the places where people cook, heal, wash, measure, travel, and hold small useful objects in tired hands. It shines not because it is untouched by life, but because it is made to meet life again and again, and still remain ready. You wake into the quiet present, where steel is so near that it has almost become invisible. It does not need a roaring furnace to announce itself now. It waits in the dim kitchen before sunrise, in the hinge of a cabinet, in the spoon lying beside the sink, in the refrigerator door that opens with a soft pull and closes with a padded sigh. The room smells faintly of soap, coffee grounds, cool water, and last night's rain drifting through a window left slightly open. Under your bare feet, the floor is smooth and still. In your hand, a stainless steel kettle feels cool, balanced, and ordinary, which is exactly how deeply successful materials behave. You fill it at the tap. Water strikes the metal bottom with a hollow ringing sound, quick and bright, then settles into a heavier slosh. You set it down and hear the tiny click of the switch. Heat begins its quiet work. The kettle trembles almost imperceptibly as the water warms, and steam gathers near the spout. This is steel not as spectacle, not as conquest, not as a famous blade, but as breakfast support staff. It has entered the plain rituals of living so completely that nobody claps for it. Nobody whispers, "Behold, alloyed civilization," while making tea. Which is probably best for everyone. A mainstream historical fact sits in the objects around you. Steel is now one of the most widely used engineering materials in the world because it combines strength, formability, durability, recyclability, and relatively low cost. It can be rolled into sheets, drawn into wire, cast, forged, welded, stamped, coated, polished, and shaped into structures large enough to hold cities and small enough to disappear inside a wristwatch. Its usefulness comes not from one perfect property, but from a rare balance of many useful properties. It is strong but workable, tough but adaptable, industrial yet oddly intimate. You move through the home and begin noticing it everywhere. Springs in the mattress gently hold your weight. Screws keep the bed frame from becoming an experimental sculpture. Door handles turn under your fingers with familiar resistance. A washing machine drum waits in the laundry room, smooth and perforated, smelling faintly of detergent and warm cotton. A razor rests near the sink. A needle hides in a sewing kit. A bicycle chain hangs in the hallway with a light smell of oil and pavement dust. Steel is a quiet chorus, clicking, holding, cutting, turning, supporting, and waiting to be needed. The quirky tidbit is small enough to fit in your pocket. The paperclip, often made from steel wire, became such a perfect little design that it changed surprisingly little after its popular modern forms appeared. It bends, grips, releases, and returns, all without a battery, password, subscription plan, or tiny blinking light asking for attention. In Norway, the paperclip even became a symbol of unity during the Second World War, though the story is more complicated than the cheerful versions sometimes suggest. A bent bit of wire holding papers together became a symbol of people holding together. History does enjoy hiding meaning in office supplies. You step outside into Morning Street. A bus sighs at the curb, its frame and engine full of steel parts working unseen. Cars pass with a wet hush over asphalt. Their bodies may include aluminum, plastics, composites, and electronics. But steel remains central in many frames: safety structures, gears, bearings, shafts, springs, and fasteners. A man rolls up a shop shutter, and the metal slats clatter upward like a mechanical yawn. A delivery worker unlocks a bicycle, the chain clicking softly. The air smells of rain, exhaust, warm bread from a bakery, and concrete just beginning to heat in the sun. Under the street, steel continues its hidden duties. Pipes carry water. Reinforcing bars strengthen concrete. Cables, bolts, plates, valves, rails, grates, manhole covers, and utility structures form a buried city beneath a visible one. You cross a bridge and feel its faint vibration through your shoes as traffic moves beside you. Painted beams hold steady beneath the deck. Expansion joints clack under tires. A river below smells of mud, algae, and distant fuel. The bridge does not ask you to admire it, though engineers probably would not mind. It simply carries you, and thousands of others, again and again. In a hospital, steel becomes truss-shaped into tools and surfaces. You walk through a corridor where wheels whisper over polished floors. A cart passes, carrying instruments wrapped in sterile packs, bed frames, surgical tables, needles, scalpels, trays, sinks, handles, and machines all rely on steels chosen for strength, cleanliness, corrosion resistance, or precision. The air smells of disinfectant, linen, plastic packaging, and coffee from a nurse's station. A stainless tray gives a small clear note when set down. Steel here is not dramatic. It is calm, repeatable, washable, and ready, which in medicine is a kind of grace. In a factory outside the city, steel works behind the rhythm of production. Conveyors move with steady clicks. Robotic arms swing in arcs smooth enough to seem sleepy. Cutting tools bite into parts with high, bright sounds. Bearings spin. Presses descend with padded thunder. The air smells of coolant, hot electronics, rubber, and clean oil. Some machines make goods from plastic, glass, paper, fabric, or food, but their own bones are steel. The material has become the maker behind the making, the frame behind the motion, the quiet muscle inside automated patience. Some historians and material scholars still debate how future societies will measure steel's legacy as the essential skeleton of modern life, as a major source of industrial emissions, or as a recyclable material that can help support cleanest infrastructure if production methods change. That uncertainty belongs to your own century. Steel-built rails, towers, pipes, tools, ships, kitchens, hospitals, and power grids. It also required mining, fuel, heat, and enormous energy. Its story now includes electric arc furnaces, scrap recycling, hydrogen experiments, carbon capture ideas, and efforts to make production less damaging. The metal remains practical, but the questions around it have become moral, technical, and environmental all at once, very considerate of the 21st century to make even a beam complicated. You visit a scrapyard in the afternoon, where steel has another life waiting. The place smells of rust, oil, damp dust, and sun-warmed rubber. Piles of old appliances, beams, pipes, car parts, and machinery rise like strange metallic hills. A crane swings overhead, lifting scrap with a magnet that gathers metal pieces in a sudden clattering embrace. It is oddly satisfying. The magnet releases, and the scrap crashes down in a bright, chaotic roar. Steel is highly recyclable, and scrap can be melted and remade into new products. The old refrigerator may become rebar. The broken beam may become a tool. The worn rail may return as something unrecognizable, because steel is very good at not being sentimental about its previous employment. In a wind farm, steel stands in a different mood. Towers rise from fields or sea, pale and smooth beneath wide skies. The air smells of grass, salt, or dry earth, depending on where you stand. Blades turn slowly above, making a soft, sweeping sound, like giant wings thinking. Steel supports renewable energy systems in towers, foundations, gears, fasteners, and transmission infrastructure. In solar farms, steel frames hold panels toward the light. In power grids, steel towers and components carry electricity across distance. The same material that fed coal-fired industry also supports cleaner systems, a twist so neat that even a tired narrator must raise an eyebrow. At the edge of a construction site, you watch workers tie steel rebar before concrete is poured. The rods are ribbed under your fingers, rough with rust-coloured dust. Wire twists around intersections. Boots scrape against gravel. A mixer turns nearby with a low churn. Wet concrete smells mineral, heavy, and alkaline. Once poured, it will hide the steel entirely. That hidden partnership matters. Concrete resists compression. Steel resists tension, and together they allow buildings, tunnels, dams, roads, and foundations to endure forces neither material handles as well alone. Many modern structures are, in a sense, quiet agreements between stone-like mass and metal nerve. Even in the digital world, steel refuses to retire. Data centers contain steel racks, fasteners, cooling systems, cable trays, structural supports, and backup generators. Your phone may feel like glass and aluminum, but steel may appear in tiny screws, shields, springs, frames, tools used to make it, machines that assembled it, ships that transported it, and warehouses that stored it. The cloud, that dreamy name for other people's computers, rests on very physical materials. Somewhere, steel shelves hold servers humming in chilled rooms. The internet has a body, and parts of it are metal. Evening comes. You return home through streets lit by lamps mounted on steel poles. A train passes in the distance, its sound softened into a long murmur. In an apartment above you, someone opens a drawer and cutlery shifts with a familiar chime. A bicycle leans against a railing. A key turns in a lock. Rain begins again, touching fire escapes, gutters, balcony rails, and parked cars with tiny silver taps. Steel receives the weather without complaint, though it quietly appreciates paint, coatings, and occasional maintenance. Strong does not mean needy never. Strong often means useful enough to deserve care. You sit by the window with a warm cup in your hands. The spoon inside it rests against the ceramic with a small clink. The room is dim. The air smells of tea, rain, and clean fabric. Outside, the city hums, held together by beams, cables, pipes, rails, springs, screws, frames, brackets, and tools so ordinary they nearly vanish from thought. And now the story begins to soften. The metal around you no longer glows or roars. It rests in the quiet shapes of daily life, in the latch that holds, the bridge that carries, the bed that supports, the kettle that warms, the rails that hum far away under the night. You breathe slowly, and the rain keeps time on the window ledge. All the fires, all the hammers, all the mills and towers seem to fade into one steady note. Steel becomes stillness now, not noise. It becomes shelter, weight, balance, and calm. Your hand loosens around the cup. The room darkens at the edges. Somewhere in the distance, a train passes like a gentle thought, and the world made of metal settles quietly into sleep.